Happy Halloween 2024. I think that saying you like Halloween is a pretty easy thing to do. Who doesn't love a little tribute to the spooky scary season with all the bad last minute costumes and pumpkin stuff all over the place? And of course, it's a great time to engage with your favorite scary games or movies. Whether it's a more playful take on ghosts like Luigi's Mansion or something a bit heavier, it's all in good fun. But for me, the movie that I always associate with this time of the year is 1993's Nightmare Before Christmas. I can't show you too much footage of the movie because I'm scared of Disney, but Henry Selick's Nightmare Before Christmas is loaded with all kinds of Halloween imagery, and it's got such a lovable, macabre tone. I actually watched Nightmare Before Christmas long after its prime as Hot Topic's poster child, but I still fell in love with its spooky vibes nonetheless. Of course, this isn't a movie review, and I wouldn't be talking about it if it wasn't for this little thing right here. Nightmare Before Christmas, Oogie's Revenge on the PS2 or Xbox. Despite being a mainstay in all spooky adjacent Disney merch, the original movie never got a sequel. Like a lot of overdue movie sequels, it ended up falling into the hands of game studios. If I had a quarter for every time a movie got a weird pseudo-sequel as a video game, I'd have 3 quarters. Oogie's Revenge was released by Capcom in 2005, over a decade after the movie's release. And from what I've read online, the game was made to capitalize on the success of the original movie's characters, particularly in Japan. I have to assume that the inclusion in Kingdom Hearts had a hand in it, but it might be a chicken or the egg situation. Capcom has a long history of working on Disney games, and it makes me wonder if that had anything to do with it as well. With Capcom at the helm, the game would be adapted based on one of their major IPs, which ended up being Devil May Cry of all things. It makes sense to me that Capcom would use their existing engine to streamline development and maybe pay some bills for the next project. Please bear with me if you're really good at these games, because I am not, and I know that people get disgustingly good at these things. I'm really just playing this as a fan of the movie and less as a fan of Capcom action games. I do love the Bayonetta games, so I'm excited to check this one out. I've really wanted to take a look at this game for quite some time, but I felt like I had to wait for Halloween. So now we can finally take a look at
The Nightmare Before Christmas, Oogie's Revenge.
I'm playing the game on the original Xbox because I just assumed it would run the best. Apparently, a GameCube version was considered at some point, but it never got released. Oogie's Revenge functions as a sequel to the original movie. In case you've never seen the movie, here's a quick rundown. Jack Skellington is the Pumpkin King of Halloween Town, one of a bunch of magic worlds that exist as our holidays. But Jack grows tired of the routine and ends up kidnapping Santa in order to take Christmas for himself. And while he pretends and fails to be Santa, he learns to be content with his role as Pumpkin King. But back in town, an evil spirit called Oogie Boogie torments Santa until Jack returns to set things right. There's a bit more to it, but that's pretty much the plot. Now with Oogie's Revenge, we return to Halloween Town 1 year after the original story. Jack is out of town looking for new ideas on how to improve Halloween, but when he gets back, he finds that it's been deserted and overrun by bands of aggressive skeletons and ghosts.
Oh! I don't believe we've met. I'm Jack.
3 of Oogie's minions from the original movie have decided to revive him Ganon style, and so Jack has to find a way to stop Oogie Boogie and prevent him from becoming king of all 7 holidays. You'll of course find yourself playing as Jack Skellington. With a new magical whip called the Soul Robber, you can explore and engage in combat as you travel through locations from the original movie. I hope you like the name of the whip because you're gonna hear it every 10 seconds.
Soul Robber! Soul Robber! Soul Robber! Soul Robber! Soul Robber!
Seeing Jack Skellington as a video game protagonist is a little bit funny to me. On the cover art, they depict him as this cool dude with a cool new whip weapon, but in the original movie, he's just a nice guy that's actually kind of naive at times. In terms of the writing and the cutscenes, he's depicted just fine, but of course, being a video game character now, he has to get into combat at the drop of a hat. I suppose you gotta do what you gotta do. Jack Skellington works great as a stop-motion puppet, but as a video game character, it is a little strange. Running around as this silly skeleton man always feels a little off because of his proportions. I'm not really sure what I'm trying to say about this, because it's not that much of a problem, but it is funny to imagine Capcom trying to work this character into their mold. Plus, he just kind of looks silly running around. In terms of the environment though, everything has been adapted very faithfully. Everything feels right in line with the movie, and the original art director and Tim Burton were both involved with the game, offering advice on certain aspects of the world. There were loads of details ripped directly from the film, and if you know what you're looking for, you can spot them all over the place. The game also features loads of returning voice actors. Jack Skellington sounds just like his original self, and many of the other townsfolk have their original voices too.
You'd better climb down from here and evacuate to someplace safe.
Thank you, Jack.
If there were any new actors, I sure didn't notice. I think that they did a really good job matching the tone. Most of the soundtrack is copied straight from the film, but I did notice a lot of places where the words were changed. It did drive me a bit crazy listening to This Is Halloween every time I got into a fight. As far as I can tell, there is one original song, and it plays during the laboratory boss. Take a quick listen. I think one of the best things that games like this can do is let you explore their depictions of famous landmarks from the original material. From the start, you're introduced to the main plaza that appeared in the original movie. This area works as a hub where you can restore your health, get upgrades, and head off to new areas. You can see where every location from the original story is set, roughly in regards to the rest of the world, and you can even see stylized depictions of distant areas. Even the map screen is designed to fit the setting. It makes it a bit hard to read at times, but it's still pretty neat.
Huh? What's this?
Jake!
Of course, being an action game, you won't just be walking around aimlessly, and you'll need to get into fights with all sorts of ghouls and ghosts. Based on my little experience with the Devil May Cry games, it feels just like a Devil May Cry game. The only real difference is they removed half of the buttons. There is still a lock-on, but there are no guns, and the weapon attacks are all set on very basic inputs. You can't even jump, so the combat can feel really trimmed down for fans of action games. Combat is really simple, but it is fun to just wail on the enemies as they come by. The Soul Robber is your main weapon. X gives you a quick attack that can do some combo moves, and Y lets you grab enemies or objects and throw them around. B is your dodge roll, which reminded me of a certain someone, and since there's no jump, A just interacts with stuff. I thought it was kind of interesting that you can still taunt like in Devil May Cry, but it isn't that important. The first section of the game can honestly be a bit boring since you have basically no attacks. Thankfully, as things get upgraded, I was able to have a bit more fun. But I can't imagine that a lot of people would get into a combat-focused game with very boiled down combat-focused mechanics. You do still get ranked on a bunch of different metrics in every level, but I think that you'd need to be a fan of the source material and a fan of the genre to actually invest the time to get high ranks here. Later on, Jack can transform into the fire-breathing Pumpkin King or the trap-laying Santa Jack. I honestly didn't notice I had unlocked the Pumpkin King outfit until I got to a point where I had to burn something and I just pressed all the buttons. This form has limited ammo, but it can be used to clear out large crowds of enemies. It's got a way bigger area of effect than it looks like, and it makes some fights against weaker enemies a breeze. Santa Jack, on the other hand, functions more as a specialist. This form has a set of 4 gifts that do a handful of things like stunning or freezing. The shield gift was really good since it can make you immune to some of the traps during platforming segments. But the throwing mechanics along with the automatic lock-on made it really hard to want to use Santa Jack more than it was necessary to. Every time you throw, you have this really long windup and most of the time you'll just end up getting hit. And once the trap is laid down, if you missed, you have to spam the use button in order to clear them all up. Also, I'm certain that that sound effect is from Mega Man X. One other thing I noticed is that since I'm playing on the Xbox, I had to use black and white buttons instead of R2 and L2 on PlayStation. They're used for targeting and detonating bombs, which made it really weird to control sometimes. Those 2 buttons just weren't meant to replace triggers, and a lot of games, since they were developed for PS2, would end up using them for that. As you progress, you'll earn souls from defeating enemies, and you can use them to buy upgrades at the witch's shop. I found it pretty easy to unlock most of the stuff I wanted. Earning souls was a lot easier when I found out that you can use the spin attack to suck them all towards you. The soul robber upgrades give you additions to your combo, but unfortunately the other forms just get better numbers. More damage, more stun time, that sort of thing. It was a bit sad to me to find out that being in Pumpkin King form really just gives you 2 attacks. In the end, the combat here is really stripped down to the bare essentials. But you do have to consider that this game was developed so that anybody could play it, and honestly these tie-in games at the time were dime a dozen schlock. The Devil May Cry bones that it has still make it way better than so many of its contemporaries.
What's this?
The bosses, like any other character action game, are actually a big selling point. I really like this one spider fight where you have to break up the spider and then clear out the pieces before they come back together. Suddenly, during fights, musical notes will start showing up. You can gather these music notes by damaging the bosses, and after you gather enough, you get to enter a rhythm game segment. The first time it happened, it took me by surprise, and I fell out of it immediately. But I got up to speed after a bit. I guess being a musical, they had to fit those elements in, and they do it pretty well. After the first dozen levels or so, you'll come to grips with the gameplay loop. Fight battles, explore a bit, fight some more, and then continue. The longer the game went on, the longer the levels got. And the longer the levels got, the more I found myself getting lost in them. And not in a good way. When you bring up your map, it'll show you on a mark where Jack is and where Jack needs to go, but sometimes that level of detail just wasn't clear enough and I couldn't wrap my head around where exactly I was going. The best example of this is probably the level with the vampire bats, probably the worst level in the game. At this point, you've pretty much seen all of Halloween Town. You've been to the laboratory, the graveyard, the pumpkin patch, which were all fun in their own ways, but then you get put into this neighborhood area that's entirely new to the game and told to find these missing vampires that are stuck in bat form. It's all dark gray with lots of vertical areas that you have to use the whip to reach. Since everything is contextual though, you end up having to mill about until you find the right spot to whip and reach higher areas. The dark pathways, contextual whip spots, and fixed camera led me to run around here for almost an hour looking for a way to reach these bats. And then there's this one bat that hangs around this pit. I had to chase this guy around in circles, and if I got too close to the ledge, I would just slip off and have to climb my way back up. It's such a tedious segment to get through. Definitely didn't get a good rank on that one.
It's ruined.
Soul bonus!
Thankfully though, the rest of the game is a real highlight. The section immediately following the bats has you saving the mayor on top of a giant spiraling rooftop, avoiding pitfalls as you climb higher and higher. And the part after that sees you sent straight to the fiery pits of Oogie's lair. The real highlight though is when you finally get to reach the iconic Spiral Hill and the hinterlands afterward. When I finally reached the hinterlands, I was really taken aback from how gorgeous it was. This forest with all the holiday portals has had the color sucked out of it, and it just looks awesome. The way they represent the movie's clay sort of grass lines with textures was done really well. The level itself is a bit backtracky with the way the puzzle is laid out, but I mean, look at this place. And of course, once you set the doors back, it returns to how it looked in the movie. My biggest complaint is that Oogie's Revenge doesn't give you a chance to see what the other holiday worlds look like. I have to know what Independence Day Town looks like. The last few levels are all set in Christmas Town, which was a breath of fresh air. The level of faithfulness carries through into these levels, of course. I couldn't tell what this one thing was until I rewatched the movie and realized it was a snow fort from like one shot. You have this short little collectathon moment where you need to do some puzzles and get everything to fix the tree. One part has you changing train tracks in order to get the train where you need a platform to be, but I'm pretty sure I did that one wrong. I couldn't figure out how to time this lever and ended up just dodging up the side of the train to get on top. It took me forever to do, so I wasn't complaining.
You again?
Sandy, it's not... Well, you see, I'm truly...
This is the worst!
Soon you're at the final boss, a big encounter with Mega Oogie. You just knock the guy down and wail on them until you get put into a final dance battle.
It's over! It's over! Your scheme was bound to fail! It's over! You're finished here! Your next stop will be tail!
This part was actually pretty fun. I felt like I was doing pretty good at the rhythm segment and took out the boss pretty quickly.
Forgive me for causing you trouble again.
Oogie Boogie is taken out once again, Santa can go do his Christmas thing, and Jack and Sally meet back at Spiral Hill. I was happy to see that after the game's over, you can unlock a few alternate costumes. You get them from earning ranks in the game, so I guess there's some incentive to try again. Other than that, there isn't that much to do, and so that was the end of my time with Nightmare Before Christmas: Oogie's Revenge. For what it's worth, I actually had a pretty good time with it. Sure, the combat is baby's first Devil May Cry, but getting anything of that quality for a licensed game is something to be commended. It's an entertaining return to the world of Halloween Town, and I really think they put a lot of effort into everything surrounding that combat. I find games like Oogie's Revenge are sort of interesting, and they come from a different time in the game industry. It felt like not that long ago that we would get a licensed game for basically anything under the sun. If it breathed, it was on every console published by THQ. But since these games are based on licensed property, a lot of the time, even the good ones don't come back to modern platforms. Recently, we did see the Genesis, Lion King, and Aladdin games return. I don't think I'd be dying for this game to be getting a huge HD remaster or something, but a simple port wouldn't hurt. Maybe Disney will someday do a huge collection for all the 30-something games they did on PS2, but I honestly doubt it. Anyways, that's it for me today. I hope you enjoyed the video, and if you did, please be sure to like and subscribe and all that fun stuff. I'd love to know if any of you have had experience with this one in the past, maybe when it was brand new, and I wonder if it introduced some people to character action games. If it did, let me know down below. Either way, I hope you all have a great Halloween, enjoy the rest of the spooky season, and take care.